so that we can share it with people later on. And welcome everyone to Technorama Tuesdays, our first one for 2019. We're really happy as the community media training organisation to be partnering with Technorama to produce and present these Technorama Tuesday sessions, which are all about technical issues within your stations. But of course, as we'll see as we go along, that technical issues have huge impacts on all other parts of the station. So the way the year's kind of going to go is we're going to have some generalist topics every second month, and then the alternate month we're going to have some really specialist technical topics. So we thought we'd kick off the year with the Start the Year Safely session, and that's for absolutely anybody out there who is working in a radio station and wants to find out a little bit more about what are the important things when it comes to your workplace health and safety. And we're very lucky to be joined this evening by Josh Pearson, who is the Technorama Secretary. You'll be able to see Josh there. Josh has had corporate roles where he was directly responsible for workplace health and safety outcomes for his teams and the businesses at large. His workplace health and safety experience includes broadcasting stations, theatres, concert venues and airports. Josh is regularly employed as a WHS compliance officer and he's a recognised project manager. As he said, is the Secretary of Technorama, and we're very lucky because he has a black belt in answering tricky questions, which is really great for us tonight. So Josh, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I'll hand it over to you. We will stop for questions towards the end, so Josh will run through things. If you've got questions along the way, pop them in the chat box or in the Q&A. Thanks, Josh. You can share your screen now.
No, thank you so much. Let me click the share button and we'll all hope that technology works. Hopefully all see a really dodgy PowerPoint slide because my artistic skills are not as good as the rest of my skills. Welcome everyone, and thanks to those who are joining from obviously different time zones and different parts of the country and things. I can see a few more people still coming on, so we'll have some quick introductions. As mentioned earlier, if you've got a question or you want something answered, feel free to jump into the Q&A down the bottom of your screen or put something into the chat and we can make sure that we get it answered and see what we can do. My goal for today is to give everyone a really high level of, starting to, I guess, ask the question state about each state calls it something different. Each state has its own different practices and different regulatory systems. So we're going to go, I guess, something a little bit high level today to try and cover everybody. But if there's any specific questions or concerns you want to ask or, real world scenarios, feel free to throw them at them. The PowerPoint I've got behind is something that we use for some induction training and a few other stuff. I'm going to use it as a bit of a reference and skim through. But if anyone wants a copy, they can have it. But if anyone wants to have a chat about it afterwards or anything, you can just email me at josh@technorama.org.au. But we'll pass all those details on. Welcome. Hopefully you can all see my screen. I'm just going to move some stuff around so I can see all of the stuff on the screen. Just queuing up the question and answers there and the chat. Thank you for putting my email in there. So I guess we're going to go through today a bit of a recap on what the Work Health and Safety Act is, what are the issues, what's risk and workplace management, common workplace hazards, high risk hazards, and then construction work. We're going to go through this kind of really quickly because I'm more of a question and answers kind of guy, and hopefully you guys can all jump in and ask questions. And we've already had a couple, which is great. Learning outcomes, we don't need to go to that. So in this document, and I guess when we're referring to health and safety, we're talking about kind of different levels and different duties of care, etc. So something that you'll probably see in here a lot is PCBU, which is person conducting a business or undertaking. So this is someone who's actually doing something. Controllers or self-employed, i.e., people in your station. We're talking about people with general duties of care, and as well as, we're going to use words like reasonably practical, and then employees, which is captured under the definition of a worker, which is broadly defined to include anyone who carries out work in any volunteer. Each state has its own different interpretations of these, but they're all pretty similar. Everybody has a responsibility to maintain safety in the workplace, whether it's somebody who's coming in as a visitor right up to the board, volunteers, people on air. The responsibility of safety is for everyone. We'll come back in. I guess I'm not going to bore you guys all with reading off a spreadsheet. So looking at, I'm just trying to think. I think I did make some changes to this and it's not working. So this is what I want to go through. So how each, again, each state has its own different stuff, but there are some different, there's things called Australian standards, industry standards, which are all pretty similar. So it kind of, through a legislative framework, there's lots of materials available to each state and territory and everyone, and I can help people put in contact with them at the end of it. We'll also have stuff on the website. It has its own codes, its own kind of practices, but we're going to go with the line. They're all really similar today, unless anyone's got some specific questions they want to ask, we can really delve into it for their own station. There's guidance materials available. Everyone has industry standards. There are the Australian standards that everyone has to apply by. We then go into codes of practice, which are providing, safe workplaces. Obviously, we've got our own codes of practice for broadcasting, and there's some stuff in there that deems how we should, treat people and all that kind of stuff. The most important function of the WHS regulations is to specify the steps that are required for compliance with the general duties under the Act. So workplace health and safety is all about covering yourself. It's all about making sure that you can steps to a safe workplace, whether they're volunteers or not, to make sure that this all happens. So, making sure that you provide appropriate protective equipment, appropriate, documentation and everything that helps you maintain a safe workplace. So the WHS Act is a really strong guide, and there's some great examples in there of how to provide a safe workplace. We're just going to skip through. So, it covers everything, and there's some examples of the kind of stuff it covers from, doing construction work, hazardous chemicals, handling of asbestos is something that's covered under the Act. There are some stations out there that were built, using that and require work orders to do things. Major hazardous facilities, you're talking big things, sometimes transmitter sites, if you're going up to your transmitter sites. Mines, obviously, is something else that's covered under, and general, which is, general usually is in the WHS regulations is where office work. I think, sorry, I have changed some of this. I think my work is not up. I think I have not saved the right document. I'm just going to quickly check something, guys. Give me one sec. Sorry, Jarrett.
Oh, that's okay. While Josh is checking that, I'll just let you guys know that I don't know if anyone in the room has done the CMTO Workplace Health and Safety. I hope my microphone is actually working.
I can hear you. Yep.
Yeah, okay, cool. I don't know if anyone's done the CMTO Workplace Health and Safety training, but we do have a Workplace Health and Safety training session that you can kind of have as a pathways training session at your station. One of the things we're working on at the moment is turning that into an online module, so an online course. So it's something that we're thinking you might want to, it'll be very generalist in terms of not specific to your actual station, but if it's something that you wanted to include in your induction for new trainees at the station, it's the kind of thing that we'll be able to roll out free to all the stations to be able to use. So we're looking to have that kind of up and online so people can just go online and do it. You'll work through a couple of modules online, and then you'll come out the end with a certificate of achievement that you've gone through and covered all of the WHS issues. So we should have that up online from about July this year. So stay tuned to CMTO's newsletters to hear a little bit more about that. So yeah, it should be good, I reckon. It means that, lots and lots of organisations and workplaces now have online WHS courses that needs to go, that people need to go through before they can start volunteering or working there. So it's kind of along the lines of that model.
Thank you. I'm going to slightly modify what I'm doing because the technology has failed me and not
okay.
the document that I worked on my work computer before I left today.
And did you leave it at work?
I have it at work. NBN and things not working here. I did upload a document before I left, but I'm thinking somebody has closed my computer screen before it's finished. That's right. I'm going to hit share on this. Hopefully. Now it's telling me I don't have an internet connection. I'm pretty sure I still do. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can still hear you.
That's oh, correct.
Yep, you're there. Now we can see it. That's great.
We're going to just kind of skip through. So I guess some of the big things from a station perspective and aimed at boards or management is risks must be identified and controlled. All right, so always aiming to eliminate risks, and if not reasonably practical, then minimising risks. So we talk about risk minimisation. You know, if obviously you want to provide hot water in your kitchen, what are some safe ways you could do that? You know, we will remove the kettle from the stove and have a functioning kettle on the wall. Or, you know, tell people that they have to have cold coffee. There are ways to minimize risks. But obviously, you know, as far as reasonably practical, you know, telling people that we're not going to provide hot water anymore because it's not safe to do so usually isn't going to be an option. So, you know, coming back through how are we going to do that? How can we actually do things? So risk, and the other thing I guess want to do is risk assessments are not mandatory, but must be outcome focused. You don't have to go back after this and have a risk assessment for everything in your station, but it's really good to have an idea of what's happening and then regularly maintain and review risk control measures. So, you know, whether it's a walkthrough once a quarter with the station to make sure that the building is safe, things are safe, kitchens are safe, studios don't have hanging wires, etc. You know, showing yourself that you've successfully kind of, I guess, prevented risk in the office by having some structures in place about doing, you know, I guess what's safe and what's smart to do so. When going through risks and managing risks, there are, you know, follow the codes of practice. So there are codes of practice about electrical safety, about there also is really good guidance on if you want to do a risk assessment. But again, I'm not telling you to go out and do a risk assessment after this. This is about, I guess, maintaining yourselves so you guys can have discussions about safety in your stations, about risks, about workplace health, and maintain stuff. I'm just going to read things as I go along because it's slightly out of order to what my notes have, but so, you know, workplace health and safety, I'll skip to the bottom one there, is about consultation, cooperation, and coordination. It's about everyone being involved. It's about your whole station having an understanding about what's happening and, you know, chatting together about things. So the code is, and we'll go in a minute, bring up for New South Wales. I'm just going to skip through some things because it's not where it should be. There's some things that have changed, but not everything. This is great work of technology happening for me on the first one of these this year. Common hazards to be found in most workplaces are considered to be electrical work, risk of falls, hazardous manual tasks such as lifting and moving things, plants and structures. So in stations, we're talking about, you know, master control rooms or server rooms, radio equipment, you know, anything where there's, I guess, you know, heavy kind of bulk equipment, transmitter sites, etc. And then down to hazardous chemicals and things. And, you know, people common say to us, oh, we don't have any hazard chemicals here. Well, if there's a kitchen or a bathroom, you probably do, or a cleaner's cupboard. You know, there's some really high level things to make sure that, you know, your electrical equipment is test and tagging, and you've got records of gear and when it's been tested and maintained from, you know, anything you're providing in a workplace. You need to make sure that you have that regularly checked and maintained. You know, workplace health guidelines, and also deem about things that, you know, electrical equipment must be, you know, maintained. It can only be worked on in certain circumstances. So for me, I, you know, do some maintenance of transmitter sites, etc. If we go out on site, we've got to follow through a list of things to make sure that the gear's shut down correctly and all that kind of stuff before we actually start work. I'm just going to skip through these. We're probably going to get to question time, and I'm going to talk a bit off the book because it's going to be a bit quicker than this. Because this is still one that we've changed for construction. Why don't I just close that off, and I'm going to switch to just me and go through some of the things. Sorry, guys. So I'm just going to, because I've now kind of, you know, thrown myself out a little bit by not having stuff. When, you know, I guess, and feel free if people want to ask questions and jump in now, you know, we can. So some of the things that I'm obviously we're pointing to and stuff here are, if we're outside, like I'm just reading through the comments here now. So if we're away on our outside broadcasts, has anyone here ever done a risk assessment on an outside broadcast? It's something that at my time at Joy, we would always make sure that we did, that there was a risk assessment always conducted on outside broadcasts. And that can be very high level as to, what's the place that we've got. Ron said no, thanks Ron. Making sure that we maintain those level of risks and stuff. And having conversations with people, it doesn't, we don't have to go into really high level detail and have a full workplace risk assessment, but having some really high level stuff about, okay, we're attending an outside broadcast. Are we bringing mats to cover the cables? Are we making sure that anything that we run has been tested and tagged as per, and then as per the requirements of where we're having the event? Do we have the appropriate insurance to cover our volunteers for attending outside broadcasts and events? Dave's just put in there, is there, where are we? So in TV, we always had to cover power, audio, and video cables if there were people maybe walking. In TV, we've got vehicles that can drive over and have used rubber mats at a community station to cover cables. So again, what he's saying there is, they've put steps in place to make sure that one, hey, they're protecting their cables, but two, they're also protecting people from tripping hazards, and a whole bunch of stuff. When having these chats, I guess, at stations, it's really, the Workplace Health and Safety Act defines that you need to make sure that you've done every step reasonable to make sure that you've provided a safe place. Now, covering things with mats is great, putting signs up, putting tape up, making sure that you run the cables not where people might walk over them, are other options as well. Obviously, it's not always going to be the case, but if you go to Bunnings and get yourself some rubber mats and have the rubber mats covering up your cables, you've kind of ticked the box of we've provided a safe area. Coming back to your stations, if you're running studios, if you've got your studio setups and stuff, you don't have power cables running across the desk. You don't have leads running around where people can trip over it or where people can knock into things. It's a common thing I see when going into stations that, we've had to run a lead and we've run it across the floor or covered a doorway, and hasn't been taped down or et cetera. So things like that where you can tape stuff down to make sure that you provided, a safe workplace. Sorry, my computer's telling me that I keep dropping out. I'm not
sure. You're just dropping out. It's all right. We can still hear you. It's just a little drop here and there. I had a question, Josh. So say, for instance, you're at a station, you feel very overwhelmed by the idea of WHS and it's been neglected for quite some time. Maybe there's not been anyone on the board looking after it. The OHS policy is a few thousand years old. What's the best place to kind of start? Say you're on the management committee or you're on the board, or you're the station manager. What's the best place for you to start? So, because I know in my experience, people get really overwhelmed by WHS within the station.
Yeah, so look, I always think the best place to start is to have a bit of a chat about, just start having that chat about where things are at. So, what documents do you have and when were they last maintained? Going through, there are some great checklists, and it's really hard because everything's state by state based, and the laws are very subtly different, which can trick you up based on which state you're in. But going back to, so here in Victoria, we've got WorkSafe. They're really, really friendly and proactive, and will give you checklists right off their website. I've got John Maisel actually putting some stuff up, hopefully at the moment, on the Technorama website, which will give you some information on those checklists and things. They're, making sure that, if you're going to start on these kind of chats, that you don't go over the board. You don't come in gun-blowing and saying, we're going to take every single sharp object out of the station because someone said it was a risk hazard. You've really got to take that step back and think about, making it a bit of a change management and project management process. So sitting back with, what are the hazards in our station? What are the top 5 things you need to worry about? Is there a recent workplace incident? Is there anything that people have reported and said, we've been tripping over that cable that's running from the back shed to our transmitter, or is, take that step back for a second before you jump into it, because sometimes overreacting to it can actually make things worse. And we've seen that happen a lot in a few stations where they've gone through and stripped everything out or made a major process change or spent $20,000 on putting a ramp in at the front when they've got a ramp at the back, So making sure that, you sit down with the board and you have those, and, having a discussion about health and safety isn't a bad thing. Feel free to start it with anyone at your station. It's not something that I don't think should be just limited to boards. I think any person can bring up something and say, this is a safety issue, or I think we should do this here.
And should a station generally have some kind of workplace health and safety reporting mechanism for volunteers?
So by law, you have to have an incident reporting structure. Now, that doesn't have to be an official form in the kitchen or whatever. That can be via email. That can be via, regular meetings or etc. You have to have a way of passing information up about health and safety. So a lot of stations I've been involved with usually have a safety representative, whether it's it could be the station manager, it could be a key volunteer or a key board member. But having an email or a channel that someone can say if there's a safety issue or concern, we can chat to this person about that issue. It's not a. I'm just moving right to plug it in. It's not a. There's no one deemed way of best practice of reporting that incident up.
But it's say that the people on the management committee or the board should be aware that they need to action or take on those complaints or take on that feedback.
Yeah, correct. So anyone who's reporting, anyone who reports an incident and depends on anyone who reports a health and safety incident, that incident must be investigated and there must be a trail. So there must be follow-up, there must be a reply. And that reply can be, yes, thank you, we've identified that cable, we've since moved it or we've since covered it up with a mat and we've alerted everyone else about it. So in my presentation that didn't quite work, one of the options in there was, one of the key points in there was taking steps to, reasonably maintain the area is safe. Doesn't mean you have to provide a 100% safe place. Not everyone has to be wrapped up in bubble wrap, but you have to show that you've taken your steps to make sure that, if the carpet was fraying, we've put a mat down to cover that up so it's no longer a trip hazard.
And do you find, Josh, often in our stations that, kind of it's more of a reactive environment, or would you say there's a good kind of environment of people doing risk management and looking at the risks beforehand, or do they just wait for something to come in via email and fix it then?
I think it is very reactive, which is where, it's in the sector we're in, and community sector is pretty much the same across the board, is we wait for there to be a fire before we put it out. Put your hand up if any stations do differently, let us know in the chat. But, one of those things is about having those chats beforehand and before the incident happens, or having the steps in place that when there is a, metaphorical fire, that you guys have steps and people in place who can action that straight away without having to wait for something. There's nothing worse than having to wait for a safety concern to be fixed. So if there's something occurs, yes, whilst we can't always plan for everything, having steps in place that say, okay, when there is a safety issue, the board acknowledges that the first steps are going to be the safety issue is stopped. Then, you can have a review about that situation. Obviously, there's some maintenance and general tasks and things you can do by keeping your building maintained, keeping keeping maintenance records on electrical equipment, tag kinds are all designed to be preventative, but obviously that always can't be the case.
Mm. So if we're talking about, one person put in, I can't remember who it was, put in the chat, you don't want to learn, Peter Van Shake said, you don't want to learn this stuff in court. So
exactly.
When it comes to that sort of thing, I guess in the person conducting a business kind of idea is that where do volunteers kind of sit in terms of their duty of care and that sort of thing within the station? Because I think for a lot of us, we're just volunteers within a station. We're not on a management committee or a board. Yeah.
So when it comes to safety, one of the key points I touched on before was everyone's involved. Everyone has the same responsibility about reporting and maintaining a safe environment. It's up to the board though when those things become a financial or a business change to change. So someone's asked questions about bullying in the workplace. there's things that can be only done when people are obviously reporting these things and people know about it. So we can use, I'll use the bullying one for an example. If there's bullying going on in the workplace, obviously most stations will have policies around bullying, policies around harassment, etc. If they're reported and then they're not followed and something happens because of that incident, then it's the responsibility of whoever it was reported to. The buck stops with the last person who had it in their email chain, is how the courts see it. So if someone reports a electrical hazard and the station goes down, someone hurts themselves, whoever that hazard was reported to, be it the community management or board or etc., they're then responsible for that incident.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a, some people, I guess, when you're looking at it, state by state, there are some grey areas and there are some loopholes about the rights and responsibilities. But when it comes down to a basic legal matter, the last known person who it was sent to is where the buck stops.
Okay, that's good to know. So in terms of like going about doing a bit of a risk management assessment at my station, can you kind of maybe run me through the steps of what we do?
Yeah, so the walkthrough is probably the best method for that, and it's walk through with your pad and paper and identify things. So I'm pretty sure everyone can see your office that you're sitting in right now.
Yep.
I can see that there's behind me it's quite a boring black backdrop.
Look
there.
at that hazard.
So
things
straight up on that bookshelf. Yeah, straight up on that bookshelf, you've got obviously things that are high. So please tell me that there's a nice step ladder easily accessible for you to get things off that top shelf.
Yes, there is. We have a step ladder next door, what we use.
Borrow it. That you've got, bookshelves. Are they secured to the wall? Chairs you're on, are they free? Are they allowed to be free moved? Etc. So, it's really walking through kind of room by room and step by step and just going, what is in this room? And putting it through a bit of a risk scale. I think everyone's probably seen a bit of a risk. What is the risk of it falling? What is the risk of someone tripping over it? What is the risk of, someone picking it up and throwing it at someone? Might be a crazy risk, but, there's a reason that the banks don't put scissors on the counter. It just removes the risk from things. Having that kind of stuff when you're walking through and having a bit of an open about stuff and not fix your walk. So, it's very dangerous and fix it straight away. But I'm just waiting for my internet connection to say reconnecting. This is the NBN people.
We can hear you okay.
That's fine. Sorry. I just keep getting a big red screen that says your internet connection is unstable. Having those kind of, being able to do that walkthrough and have someone else with you and identifying hazards, there's some things that you probably tick off straight away. And there are some things that you'll need to go back and take bigger. But what I'll do is once, I noticed John Mazel's joined in, so I'm going to dob him in and say I'm going to send him some stuff to put on the web after this. We'll send him through some checklists and stuff about what stations should do to identify hazards and risks, etc. Being able to go through and, if you're walking into, I'll give you a station through my head that I can think of walking into last. You walk in, you walk up to you come into the lift well. What's the ground like? Is it free of tripping hazards? Is there anything in the way? You go up the lift. You come out into a reception area. There's carpet tiles. Sometimes they're not lifted. Sometimes they're lifted. Sometimes they're not. You've got things hanging above your head. You've got lighting that might need to be fixed because it's not working. So there's a risk if it's dark. Can people still see? Can people move around the place? You walk into a place that's full of computers and lots of heat generating equipment. Are there fire extinguishers on the wall? Have the fire extinguishers been maintained recently? Right down to what are the people in the space and are the people using the space? Are they crowding around the fire exit and blocking it up with their chairs? Have someone decided that they don't like where the coffee table is today, so they've put it up against the fire escape? There's a whole bunch of things that, it's all very, very different by every building you walk into. I'm one that can walk into a building and go, yeah, your fire system hasn't been maintained for 6 years, you should fix that. But, when's the extinguishers in your station? are they someone else's responsibility? Are you leasing the building? Does someone else need to worry about them? It's about having all these kind of things written down and having a bit of a plan. As I said, it doesn't have to be a 700-page work health document that you'd have if you were a mining factory, but you need to make sure that you're maintaining some sort of records about what equipment is in the workplace and what's being maintained. Some more things if you walk into a studio, you're touching electric panels every day, you're pushing buttons on things. Are they all sealed up nicely? Are they all, how they should be? And is your equipment being maintained and what's John's joining in. Looking through some other stuff in here, obviously, David's asked a question about low-cost test and tag courses. I will follow up with Technorama to see if that's something we can do.
That would be good. Just on testing and tagging, Josh, like generally, it's just kind of an accepted thing, but like what's your experience in stations actually getting their stuff tested and tagged, and is it worthwhile going through and getting it done every year? What's the point?
So in Victoria, there is a legal requirement to maintain test and tag. Every device you have in an office building has to be test and tagged.
Have radio stations counted as office buildings?
Radio stations are counted as office buildings, and volunteers are counted as employees. It's one of those ones where anything you do, is treated like a normal office building. So, again, I'll put to chat, is everything at your station test and tagged? Now, people's phone charges when they bring them in one-off isn't necessarily needed to do, but computers, laptops, panels, UPSs, transmitters, everything needs to be tested and tagged. Now, I can go to some stations and they probably have never seen one in their building, and I can go to others where everything is tested and tagged right up to from the kettle to the CEO's phone charger. It's a great thing to have because it's one of those things that helps you maintain a register of what devices you have in your building. One of the best things about tagging is it automatically generates you an asset register. The courses are quite easy to run and do. I used to run them, I don't anymore, but I'm sure we can find someone to do one through Technorama. I'm going to put you on the spot for that, John Maisels. One of those things, it's about maintaining and stuff. But again, the test and tag register being done once every year is only done at that one time. And that's only deeming that equipment safe at that one time. I always recommend that everyone checks everything every 6 months, right down to making sure plugs are plugged in all the way and no one's knocked anything. I know some stations out there that might have 2 or 3 computers out in a volunteer area, to some that have 20. Having all of them maintained and test and tagged is a great idea. I'm just trying to see quickly if I can find what states and stuff it's done on, but basically just looking quickly like at Victoria and Queensland, your typical need to be done every 12 months.
And then the other states not necessarily a requirement. It doesn't have the information, readily available, which usually means it's not a requirement, but it's a recommendation. Mm-hmm. Okay. And in those states where it is a requirement, I guess what's the risk for a station in terms of not having those things up to date? Is it a fine? Is it people going to jail? Is it going, what's the deal?
At the moment, there's no fine for that. There is, however, if something was to happen, you could theoretically be charged for negligence, but so far in 15 years of test and tag, no one's been charged for not having one. When you do the test and tag course, you are taught that you are only certifying that equipment at the time that you put the tag on it, which is something that if you get someone in to do some test and tagging and 3 months later it breaks, you can't go test and tag it and say good. Likewise with safety issues, if something happens to that person, you can't go back to that test and tag person to say, 3 months later, someone electrocuted themselves. You told us it was great. With those kind of things, and how the legislation works is at the time that we looked at the equipment, and that's what I guess you as a station responsible person needs to maintain, is at the time that all the equipment was checked, it was in working order. And this is why they make these periodically review these every 12 months. is that every 12 months that equipment's checked. And I've been on some sites where, we've checked it. I've checked it 12 months ago. I've gone to check it again, and the cable's been damaged, and we've taken it out. It just shows you a stationary cable sitting at the back of the computer can, almost burn it. Well, we've seen it burn buildings down. It's about maintaining things and making sure that you regularly check stuff. And I guess that's probably one of the big things to take away from today is putting safety plan information or putting together some guidelines for your station and making sure that you've got some policies around being safe at work aren't necessarily just about having that done today. Great, everyone next week goes and writes up a document and says, hey, we're safe. You should do that every 6 or 12 months.
Definitely. David Webb chimed in there to say in the ACT, so he's in Canberra, it depends on the level of risk, type of environment and so on. It varies from every 6 months to every 5 years for low risk environments. Thanks for that info, David.
And Sean said NT is the same. Yeah, so some similar stuff here based on construction equipment, etc. Once it, so drills and things like that, need to be done every 6 months. But once you're talking about, your general stationary office equipment or codecs that you're taking for OBs, etc., 12 months is usually okay. And I think it'll probably be pretty similar. You guys can correct me if not for NT or for ACT.
So we've talked a lot about equipment and the kind of risk management around that, going around, checking things, having a register, testing and tagging, make sure we're doing it regularly. How do we do risk management around something like workplace bullying?
So when it comes to workplace bullying, here in Victoria, work safety will hand that across to Fair Work Australia. I'm not sure about other states, but there are some stuff in, obviously, when it comes to work health and safety, about making sure that you have policies and procedures that include, escalation paths, etc. So if something's happening at the station, where can somebody go confidentially for a chat, or where can somebody go to report that this issue is happening? Bullying is probably a whole webinar and segment on its own. But from a legal perspective, you've got a legal responsibility to maintain a safe, healthy, and reasonable workplace. Message pop-ups. So if you need to maintain that safe workplace, there's no legislation exactly that's going to say, you allowed somebody to be bullied in your station, therefore you're going to jail. But there are fines involved. And obviously they differ on where you are. So from a station perspective, if someone is being bullied at their station, I would say to them, go to your station manager or somebody on their committee of management and say, where are your policies based around this? If we don't have policies, then we should be making policies based on this.
And in your experience, what are some of the, what are some of the things that stations have done to, I guess, ensure that workplace bullying doesn't happen?
Yeah, look, again, it's one of those things about being open and honest and having chats with people. A lot of good stations I see are the ones that, have their policies available when you sign up as a volunteer and regularly available on a portal or a drive or a folder at the station, depending on where you are. Making sure that the policies are maintained and within your state requirements, but also then having really open and honest chats with people about, regular things about, hey, you can always come to me and talk to me about stuff. But, having that policy and procedures to back it up is going to be the biggest thing. And sometimes when it comes to a really difficult situation of talking about workplace bullying, or personal bullying that then comes into the workplace, having some policies and procedures to sit in front of you and go, here is my great bit of paper, and I'm going to sit here and go, these are the steps we have to follow to resolve this issue. And then all parties, the accused and et cetera, all have something they can work off to make sure that, the procedures are being followed and you guys are maintaining a really open and clear communication with how those steps work with all parties. So, one of the stations that I've worked at, we recently redid the bullying policy, and, it clearly states line 1, if you wish to make a complaint, here is where you make the complaint to. It's the general manager of the station. If the complaint is about the general manager of the station, then you go to this person. These are the timelines that you can, that it will take us to resolve this. So for this station that we did, it was 4 weeks, that this whole case and matter has to be resolved within 4 weeks, which then means it's speedy for everyone. So, if we reach out to person A, they've got 1 week to respond. Person B's got a week to respond. So having that really clearly documented in a policy and making sure that, you know, that's followed really makes it easy for you to manage those situations.
Definitely. And if anyone's got any questions at this point, let me know, pop your hand up or put something in the chat box or in the Q&A if there's any more information about any of those other bits and pieces. We've just got John Maisels on the line just talking to us about,
Yep.
He's in NZ. Okay, so he's in New Zealand, but he's here now.
9 o'clock at night.
Having a discussion today with a venue vendor over here about exactly the test and tag discussion. And one good thing is if you get your qualification in Australia, it does apply in New Zealand, as far as we know. The other thing that they said from their point of view, pretty much anything coming into the controlled space has to be test and tagged, except for, and it was quite specific, laptop power supplies and phone chargers. So small wall wart sort of things, switch mode power supplies. Everything else sort of has to be tested. What I do believe for New South Wales, I can't swear to this, but I do believe this because I've heard it enough time, is that there is risk acceptance that you can go through. So when you do an installation in your rack and all the cabling is, of course, nicely tied down to rack channeling and you have cable ties everywhere and it's wonderfully neat and nothing is moving and it's not going to deteriorate, that you can do risk acceptance and essentially not have to recheck or retag or reclaim for at least 5 years. Josh, any comment on that? Because what you were saying for Victoria sounded completely different.
Yeah. So once Victoria basically have a really high level if it's in an office that is when it comes to, I'm just trying to find if there's something that gives me a bit of the all states rather than, you know, single Australian standards. But when it comes to there's, in like New South Wales, they have things that are called hostile environments, non-hostile environments, higher equipment, etc. Everything is a little bit different. Victoria started on that, but they slowly changed it once things became a bit weird. With stuff in theatres, we only have to have it with lights above us. We can test every 5 years, but with things that we touch and interact with every day, we have to do them 12 months. I will find some better information on the electrical test and tagging because it's not something I thought of including straight up in this. And we can share that up on the Technorama website afterwards or with the recording of this in links with Geordie. But we'll probably go with whatever the best practice is and the most kind of standard across Australia. You know, anything that is considered non-hostile, which would be a server room, it's sitting in a place where it's not removed. I'm reading a table here now that says, you know, you've got up to 5 years, but then there's other stuff that says, you know, if it's repaired, serviced, or second-hand equipment, it should be every 3 months. So, you know, what stations have second-hand equipment in their server rooms? I'll try and seek some clarity from someone I know about that, and we'll include that information out. I'll send it out to people who participate.
Thanks, Josh. It looks like Sean's actually put up the WorkSafe NT PDF about testing and tagging, and he's saying if the area is low risk, it's up to you. There's no mandated inspection and testing or tagging for electrical equipment used in lower risk operating environments. So that's interesting.
But yes, my question, and it'd be pretty cool. I'll have a read of that. Is what's a lower risk operating environment versus a higher risk? So, you know, I guess one of the things that, you know, comes back to really health and safety is there's a lot of grey areas.
There's a lot of grey areas.
Low risk environments that are dry, clean, well organised, and free of conditions. Does that explain community radio stations? So, for example, an office, retail shop, telecommunications centre, classroom, electrical equipment commonly used in these types of lower risk workplaces includes computers, photocopiers, stationary or fixed equipment. So that's nice. I like the NT laws. Maybe we could just go by them.
Finally.
What I'll try and do with John is we'll have a catch up later on today and see if we can make sure that we've got information based on states. I'll do some quick pull together and we'll have some information based on states about high-level risk plans for stations, as well as then, you know, the test and tagging requirements.
And we will post that on the Technorama website.
Thanks, John. One thing I wanted to ask a bit about, we've talked about electrical equipment, and we've talked about workplace bullying a bit. In talking about sort of things like fire escapes and, you know, evacuation procedures and stuff like that, what's the sort of bare minimum people should be looking to have in place around their station?
I'm doing a podcast on this at the moment with CFA down here. Have a plan. So there are legal requirements in every state and territory to maintain fire exits, to maintain them clear. Usually it is, you know, a 1.5 to 2 metre clear radius of all exits of uninhibited exit path, I think was the term that they used, which basically means that you have to be able to get out that door and nothing should be in your way. The fire exit shouldn't be on the other side of a storeroom, shouldn't be planned through a studio, it shouldn't be planned through anything that, you know, has an issue getting to. So, you know, maintain clear exits, I guess, is one of the things. Maintaining fire extinguishers and fire suppression equipment inside your building is a requirement across Australia as well. There is no legal requirement to have an exit plan. There is a push for that to happen a lot. The only legal requirement places to have exit plans are large multi-storey dwellings. But if I'm talking about your typical kind of, you know, community radio station that is behind the tennis club or somewhere else with a single door, there is no need to, you know, draw up all over the wall and say this is your exit plan. There's a requirement to maintain a clear exit, and then obviously have that identified with an exit sign or etc. So make sure, you know, you provide, and, you know, usually providing it as part of induction is clear and concise enough to say, you know, hey, whilst you're here, if the building is on fire, there is the door.
And what about things like smoke alarms?
So again, there's no one sleeping in the office building. It is
maybe they are.
Well, maybe they are. And if you are, go home. No, so again, very similar kind of thing. It's a bit different state by state. Here in Victoria, there is a requirement to maintain one working smoke detector in a kitchen if you have a kitchen. There is no requirement to have it anywhere else. If you are in a building that then based on your council regulations and state law, if your building occupies more than a certain number of people, you need to get more advanced fire suppression and then visual and audible alarm warnings, etc. So it can go from not having to do anything to having to do everything. It really depends on the building and listening from a council or etc. like that. They will be ones that maintain those working things for you. So if you have one, test it and make sure it works. If you're in doubt as whether you need one, feel free to give me a buzz and I can put you in touch with the right people in your state who can answer that question for you.
Cool. So the other thing I kind of wanted to roll on from that was, in terms of the cost and budgeting for WHS on a year-on-year basis as an organisation, I think that would probably be part of my risk management, right? What are some of the things that I should probably include in my organisational budget when I'm thinking about WHS?
Yeah, one of the is probably the strategy of it. So how are you going to deliver it to your volunteers? Is it an online training thing? Is it via paper? Are you going to print it and hand it to everyone, or are you going to have a web portal that maintains it? Obviously including some budget items for making sure it can get to people. Also including budgeting items for things like test and tagging, equipment maintenance, maintaining of an asset register, whether it's, done externally or internally, etc. Depending on what that cost is. In the really high level of things, being health and safety compliant at your office shouldn't cost you anything. But maintaining and making sure you've got the tools to do it might cost you a bit up front.
What about coming in and having my fire extinguishers tested and things like that, or buying fire extinguishers and stuff like that? Yeah,
so get them tested and maintained. It's always cheaper. It depends on where you are. Some clients we have, they use fire equipment services. I think it costs them $12 for a water extinguisher and about $40 for a powder extinguisher to maintain, and they come out every year and test that and make sure it works. And if it's low or needs replacing, they'll replace it as part of that. If smaller stations, if you go to Bunnings and buy a fire extinguisher for your kitchen, etc., you're probably looking at about $100. Again, if you're leasing the building from councils and stuff, like if you know down here, council provides that as part of the lease. So as part of being a commercial wholesale leaser for those type of buildings, for community organisations, council has to offer that as a service. It might be different where you're from, but down here there's quite a few that have a very similar thing where the building they're in, those systems are maintained. When if it comes to you guys maintaining your own fire, if you want one from, you don't have to get it serviced, you just have to replace it when it expires.
Okay, great.
And a fire extinguisher costs anywhere from $50 for a little one to $250 for a big one.
So it's a really good idea to have in your budget line something along repairs and maintenance that includes a certain allocation for making sure that all your WHS stuff is kind of up to date and maintained every year.
Yeah, correct. If you're doing kind of budgeting and line items and stuff, my thing would be to make sure that part of your building and maintenance budget, you've got you've got maintenance on equipment. Is all in there. Part of your technical budget, you've got things like your test and tagging and making sure that equipment's changed or repaired when it needs to be. Your particular line item for health and safety is going to be pretty small. There might be some visual aids or bollards or things you buy to help with outside broadcasts and stuff. But, from your bigger things, they should be things you do generally as a station to maintain your equipment.
Okay, great. Have we got any more questions from the group? We've got about 20 people in the room, so if anyone has any questions, please pop them into the chat box. We've got about 8 minutes left to answer anything that's burning, a hole in your mind. Just let us know. That would be great. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to kind of cover, Josh, that we might have missed.
No, look, it's the biggest thing to take away from today, and sorry the PowerPoint kind of had some issues there, but the biggest thing to take away from today is going to be, have those chats with people at your station. I'll use the national security tagline. If you see something, say something. Don't be afraid to call out safety risks. Don't be afraid to have a chat with people and find out who, if you're a part of a station board or a station manager, etc. Have somebody responsible for safety. Have it, a key person identified to be the safety officer that can go to or can take responsible for things. To make sure that there's at least someone who is collating all this information and making sure it's getting out to people, and also making sure that the work's being maintained and done. But, the second part of that is everybody in your station is responsible for safety, from volunteers to guests to, the board or community management. Is everyone is there. Everyone has a responsibility to call things out and make things safe, and no one should ever be made, no one should ever be kind of put down for bringing something up that's a safety concern. Definitely.
Peter's just said, who's got a petrol-powered emergency generator?
There's probably a few stations out there that have them, and look at that as a very simple thing. Don't run it inside the building. There's probably a good thing to have on your list of when we turn on the petrol-powered emergency generator. Don't run it. There's probably a few other things that might not go well there. If you've got one of them, I'm assuming that. Peter, if you've got one, I'm assuming that, you've got some practices in place about who fires it up and how it's fired up and where it plugs into. And, if it's not written down, it probably should be.
Cool. And I guess the other one that we haven't touched on so much is ergonomics. And I guess, RSI, physicality, those sorts of things. I mean, do we have work cover at our station? That sort of stuff.
Yeah. So, depending on what your responsibility is at the station. Most stations would be required to take out their own insurance, volunteer insurance, that protects them from slips, trips and things like that, as well as if they're employees, etc. They would have to have their own work cover don't knock the laptop off the stand, Josh. To cover that kind of stuff. So when thinking about all that and having a look at your insurance policies to make sure that you are covered for incidents that happen inside your station is probably a good thing. Because if someone sues you for tripping off their ergonomic chair and falling onto their ergonomic mouse and hurting themselves, there's no requirement to provide all those fun ergonomic things, but they're really a good idea if you can look at ways to have them in your station to, again, minimize the risk of something happening. So, making sure that you've got nice adjustable chairs. When you're sitting at your desk, people can reach things. People with accessibility issues can reach desk things that don't do anything dangerous to do so.
Great. Okay, you're still with us, Josh. So that's good.
Right. It's just this whole it's dropping out. Sorry. This whole screen goes blank and I can't see anyone or anything until it says, "Oh, you're back." Yes, there's a whole chat about the NBN for a Technorama webinar.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So maintaining kind of ergonomics and stuff, having plans, about should we look at ergonomic chairs? Should we have mats in the appropriate place or floor mats in the kitchen to prevent trips and falls? Are there things that we can do like safe child safety switches on hot water devices and make sure that, chemical cupboards are locked and things like that? When it comes to if something goes wrong, the first question that any investigator is going to ask is, what steps did you do to prevent this from happening? Now, if you prevent something happening, someone took a claw hammer to the door to open it to drink the bottle of White King because they wanted to clean their insides. If you can say, well, we had appropriate things on the cupboard that said inside this cupboard is poison, and there was a lock on the door that said, only the people who are trained can open this cupboard, you've covered yourself. And that's the biggest thing, is about making sure you've covered yourself. If, don't touch the hot stove. Because, I think every stove I've ever seen has the word on it, caution stove hot. Every cup of coffee you buy from anywhere has caution hot. It's all about showing that you've done everything you can to say, we want this to be safe. Short has just posted, the care method, we cover ass, retain employment. It's probably one that, thanks, Sean. It's a bit sad, but that's the biggest thing about workplace. And, when it comes to some organizations, they can tick all the boxes that say we've been a safe place. Now, WorkCover and WorkSafe and all those places have made it really easy for us to go through checklists, and we'll put them all up on the Technorama website to basically go, have you provided a safe workplace? If you tick yes to that box, they're not going to really ask too many more questions unless they can see you haven't.
So just to give us a little bit of a recap, I guess from what we've talked about this evening, the main thing is to start the conversation about workplace health and safety at your station. And kind of, if you're a volunteer, you kind of ask, has anyone thought about this? Is there somebody who I can pass my, feedback onto about situations? Or if you're on the management committee, on the board, is there someone there who's kind of, taking that role and that responsibility on? And sitting down and think, and then probably going and looking at what policies, what procedures you have in place. Do they need updating? Do we need to do a risk assessment? Those sorts of things throughout the station. So starting the conversation that way, and then doing it step by step.
If you ask the question and someone says, no, we don't do any of that, ask them why not.
Great. And then say, go to the Technorama website because there'll be checklists for you. Or do a CMTO training course on it.
Indeed. And look, there are, as you said, there's some great training courses, lots of free training courses in states and territories as well on this kind of stuff. Lots of councils provide really in-depth help with these things as well. I know down here, I'm in Moonee Valley Council. They've got, work, safety inspectors that they kind of call them that do local businesses and stuff. They're more than happy to help community organisations. So, reach out to anyone and ask everyone for help, and someone will come back.
Excellent.
But,
All right, we're just about out of time. Has anyone got any final questions they want to throw in there to the chat box? There's been really great to have you online, Josh, and get some of those insights. And it's really good to know that you're working in that area. And I think that's really helpful for people, because sometimes we just want to shoot, off a really quick question to somebody, and knowing that you're part of Technorama and this is your area of expertise is really great for us.
Feel free to ask. I can see kind of from, 20 people jumping on the line here that it's obviously something that a lot of people want to know about. So we might... We're currently going through the Technorama 2019 planning stuff, so we might actually do something a bit more in depth and a bit more, key focus on this, and some workshops, and bring your station's problems, and we will tell you how to do it. I'm also seeing in the chat here that join Technorama if you're not a member. You can do that by going to technorama.org.au and following the links to become a member. John has asked, when will we see the recording, and are you sending the link around?
Yes, we will. We'll probably do that on Wednesday. We'll send the link around, just so it gives us a bit of time to get it up on the website and get all of those bits and pieces up on the website too, John. So look out for that. It'll go out to everyone who attended and everyone who registered for tonight. And don't forget too, there's the wonderful Technorama Q&A on Facebook. If you're not already signed up to that, jump onto Facebook, and I think if you just search Technorama or Community Radio Question and Answer or Q&A, it'll come up for you. You can actually link to it from the Technorama website as well. So it's a great place to actually ask questions, and Josh is on there, everyone's on there. So if you have just a short WHS question that you need a quick answer to, people will jump on and answer your question for you on there.
Very responsive. I can see things where people have asked a question and 3 minutes later it's had 20 answers. So jump on and take a look.
It's a great resource. Yes, and do become a member of Technorama. You guys have got your Technorama Festival / conference coming up pretty soon in May. So it's a good chance to get together and talk to people about the technical issues at your station. But also, if you're not necessarily a technical person, it's a good place to start if you're wanting to get involved with that side of your station as well.
Yeah, if anyone wants any help or needs any questions answered, or wants a bit of a phone chat, or if you're in Victoria, I'll come and visit your station. Let us know. I can help you do some stuff. We've got some great tools to remotely view and see what you're going to do. We can do a quick workplace health and safety check via FaceTime if you like. Just shoot me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Josh. All right, so technorama.org.au if you want to follow any of that up, and it's josh@technorama.org.au. Send him a message and he'll get back to you. So thank you so much, Josh, for your time this evening. We really appreciate it. All the community out there in the community broadcasting sector really appreciates the time that you've taken to spend with us this evening. And thanks very much to everyone for joining. If you've got any extra questions, please let us know, but we'll end the meeting for tonight. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for organising.
No problem.